Hello and welcome to the Property Talks podcast with me, your host, Adam Pigott. I am the CCO of Openbrix, the soon-to-be launched property platform for the new generation. The show is focused on the good, the bad and the ugly in the property and estate agency industry. What do the new generation want and how can we as estate agents deliver and grow? We hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the first edition of this podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Chapman. With me today, we've got Sheraz Dar, CEO of Credit Ladder, and firstly, my co-host, Adam Pigott, who is the CCO of Openbrix. Hello, Adam.
Hello. Hi. Thanks, Elliot. Thanks for getting this sorted.
No problem. Adam, kick us off with a little run through of, firstly, your little history, your background, and also what's your involvement with Openbrix? How did that come about?
Sure. Well, I come from a traditional agency background. I started my own agency in Surrey in 1989.
Just a short time ago.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. I was a 26-year-old, wet behind the ears, plenty of hair. So I set that up, predominantly lettings, residential lettings, and I was the third agent in Surrey, I think, third letting agency specialist in Surrey. So we'd get passed a lot of business from estate agents who didn't know what to do with them and weren't interested in lettings. Mm-hmm. So I spent 25 years in that, eventually sold out after opening up a couple of other branches and sold out to Countrywide, who gave me a very good price. And then
you said yes, please?
Yeah, I said yes, please, and pulled the arm off. I wasn't actually planning on selling it at the time, I have to say. It was they did contact me, so it was a nice position to be in. And then I went into online and was involved with, and still am, with an online agency, letting agency called Make a Move, which is becoming one of the last men standing.
Yep.
And then I was twiddling my fingers, involving myself in some property developments as well. And I was approached by a friend of mine who was over in America to ask if I could just oversee he was interested in this company called Openbrix. And I dragged he kept saying, can you meet this chap called Sheraz Chowdhury? And I was I haven't got time for this. And anyway, he persevered. And I met with Sheraz Chowdhury, who's basically the innovation behind Openbrix, from a very great pedigree in UK export with the Treasury and good stock. So I met with Sheraz and understood what Openbrix was about, and I was massively taken. So much so that after a couple of weeks of chats, I basically said, I want in, and I want to roll in this company. And I'd like to invest, so I've made a small investment. But
so what is Openbrix?
Openbrix is going to be the next, the property portal for the next generation. We're focusing very much on technology and how millennials and Generation X and Generation Z, how they work. And we find millennials really want something back. They don't want to give their time, and if they're going to buy something, they want to know what's in it for them as well as the end product. They want a little bit of an incentive. So Openbrix is very much based on that. We're using blockchain technology, so it's the first of its kind, which is going to bring a huge level of transparency and honesty into a business, and also create a level playing field for the agents that we are seeking as our customers.
And transparency leads us nicely onto Credit Ladder and Sheraz, who's our guest. Sheraz, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Elliot. How are you?
Very well. I'm doing good.
Beautiful sunny day we have today.
It's London.
And the backdrop doesn't quite do it justice with the rain in it. It's not the best of days. But give us a little run through, just as Adam just did, on your career path to date and how you wound up with Credit Ladder.
Sure. So my background actually is as a marketer. So I historically worked in soft drinks. I then was engaged in my first online venture back in 2000. So I actually saw the whole space climb and disintegrate almost in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
I then kind of dusted myself down, worked in telecoms for a while. Then I worked at Cadbury's and Green and Blacks. So again, kind of in marketing roles.
Yep.
And then a few years back, I took what I'd done and moved back into the pure digital space. So I was group marketing director for Find a Property and Prime Location, to the bigger property portals in the UK. I was there until we merged with Zoopla. So that was about 5-6 years ago. Zoopla then went on to IPO.
Yep.
And then since that point onwards, as well as doing kind of lead marketing roles in digital businesses, I've also invested and advised primarily across prop tech and fintech businesses. Mm-hmm. Credit Ladder came about just over 2.5 years ago. Our core purpose is to help ensure that every single tenant in the UK, every month they pay their rent, it has the ability to influence their credit history and their credit score, which until we started doing it was not something that was available. So if you owned a home, your mortgage would count towards your credit score and your credit history, but as a tenant, your rent payment did not.
Yeah,
crazy.
So right now, anybody who's a tenant and is paying their rent outside of Credit Ladder, it doesn't have any bearing on your credit history whatsoever, and can't actually help you get a mortgage.
Yeah, pretty much. We were the first rent reporting platform in the UK. We are still by a significant way the biggest. To date, we've reported just under £75 million worth of rent for tenants. Working currently with Experian. In about 12 weeks' time, we'll add a second credit reference agency onto that platform.
Fantastic.
UK has 3 credit reference agencies, and so it's important that people see the benefit across all of the reference agencies,
Sure.
and not just one. So, my view is very straightforward. If you are renting, you should ensure that your rent payment finds its way into the credit ecosystem, because ultimately it will ensure or it will help improve your ability to access finance.
Yep.
And the rate at which you access finance.
I would imagine also it's a wonderful accreditation to a tenant that does pay his rent on time.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing from a Credit Ladder perspective is it's a rare commodity in that if you think about property and you think about landlords, you think about letting agents, and you think about tenants, typically what works for one may not work for the other two, and vice versa. And we've got a great position whereby a tenant on the platform who's committed to paying rent on time will see the benefit, but actually also on the flip side, a letting agent, for example, will know that person is committed to paying their rent on time, and you should prioritise renting a property to them.
So Adam, you're probably about to jump in here, but surely there's like you just mentioned, there's a huge benefit for the agent as well as
that's
for
exactly
the
what I was
tenant.
going to say. I mean, I look back at my traditional days when I had my agency for 25 years. As an agent, we had a responsibility to ensure that our tenants, our prospective tenant, was a good tenant. In those days, you'd apply for a bank reference, and you get a 1.5 line, very generic reply.
Yeah.
You then get a reference from the employer, and again that would take ages to come through, but it would tell you that the bank think that the guy can afford to pay the rent, his or her as they've got employment, but that was it. You couldn't tell if someone had a vested interest to pay their rent, and Credit Ladder absolutely does that. I think it's a wonderful concept, and we'll come on to how we're going to partner, but I would think that it's in an agent's interest to go to their client landlords and say, look, all our tenants are going to be accredited and link up with Credit Ladder as a sign of good faith.
Because surely if you've got 2 potential tenants on a property, and you've got one who's got somebody vouching for them, and you've got the other who you can see 12 or 18 months worth of their full credit history, and that they're paying their rent on time, surely that's a massive benefit. Huge. For the agent.
Yeah, that would be the principal, part of my armory in onboarding my clients. Because I would have said, look, by the way, all our tenants have to register with Credit Ladder.
Yeah.
It would give me an advantage over my competition. And why wouldn't you? Why as a tenant, why would you not want to have your credit history influenced by timely rental payments.
So if there's somebody out here potentially looking to get a mortgage or potentially looking to improve their credit history rating, are there any sort of top tips that you could give them that could help do that?
So look, as an absolute must, you need to get onto the Credit Ladder platform as a tenant. How it influences, loans, credit card, mortgages, ultimately is down to case by case basis. But what we can basically say without a shadow of a doubt is that you will improve your credit position if your rent is recognised. And Adam, you raise a good point. And let me ask you a question. A tenant that doesn't pay on time versus a tenant that pays on time. What do we say in terms of the amount of effort a tenant who's not paying on time takes up compared to good tenants?
Well, first of all, if the agent is collecting the rent, it's the agent's responsibility to ensure the rent is collected on time. And if not, they've then got to contact their client, say, sorry, the tenant we've selected for you, I know he or her has only been in for 2 or 3 months, but I'm afraid they're behind with their rent. It's not an easy conversation to have. If your job is purely to introduce the tenant and the landlord is, for example, saying, no, I don't want to pay those extra fees, I want to just you to find me the tenant and I'll collect the rent and sort everything out, believe me, they'll be back on the phone to you if their tenant doesn't pay rent. So it's the question again, I go back to say, why would a tenant, who intends to pay their rent, why would they not want to have the benefit of being on Credit Ladder? To me, the question is, why don't you want to? Maybe you don't want to pay the rent on time. I think it's a great argument.
What are Credit Ladder's achievements today? You say you've been up and running for 2.5 years. You've collected £75 million worth of rent so far. Have you got any other sort of key achievements that are the shining lights in those 2.5 years?
Yeah, I mean, rent reporting is a core part of the service we offer. It does extend beyond that. So last year we received FCA approval.
Wow.
For the ability for us to, for example, collect payments. So we launched that product later on this year, which is essentially our ability to collect the rent on behalf of the agent through open banking. And what that essentially means is, agents can effectively outsource the rent collection to us. So we handle the administration side of it. We will set up alerts and reminders. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, my view always is that a business should focus on what it's there to do. It's kind of core competency. So
is there a standard sort of price for an agent to onboard an agent who wants to have that service?
For the rent collection?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, we got to find the right balance between it being cost efficient for the agent, because they will typically have someone fulfilling that role already. And whilst we're not here to replace that person may well be better off doing something else that adds value into the agency. So we'll have a cap on it. And we'll also base it depending on how many tenants.
I suppose it depends how many tenants they have.
The pricing, for example, for 10 rent collections will be very different for one that involves 300 or 400. So, Elliot, to answer your question, we received FCA approval for what's called PIS, Payment Initiation Services. We have also been backed by HM Treasury.
Fantastic.
So HM Treasury gave us a grant for £600,000 for the work that we've done, and that work is specifically about a tech solution to ensure that tenants see the benefit of rent payment, because it is ultimately a tech solution that helps us deliver this. And also the work we're doing with lenders to ultimately ensure that lenders take into account rent payment history when considering whether or not someone should qualify for a mortgage. And I think it's important to point out that there is lending criteria in place for someone to see whether or not they qualify for a mortgage. So What we don't do is we don't replace that criteria. So that's criteria laid down by the FCA. But actually, every lender, whether it's for a mortgage, whether it's for a loan, use their own criteria to assess whether or not they will lend to an individual. And for us, basing criteria on paying, for example, £900 in rent per month on time, which is the average UK rent, is significantly more important than someone who might have a SIM-only mobile phone contract of £10 a month.
Yeah, it's just
madness.
Absolute madness. Yeah. It's taken so long for this to be read, because it's vital. I've gone through it myself at times when you're trying to get a mortgage. I remember when I was renting, that you apply for a mortgage and I think I was paying rent of about £700 a long time ago, and it was a sizable amount at that stage. And then when I applied,
that the West Wing of Buckingham Palace? I don't know.
No, it wasn't. It was a small cottage in Shepperton. But basically, I when I applied for the mortgage again, it was so difficult to try and I ended up having to get a mortgage. It's great, fantastic, but the payments were less than my rental, and they wouldn't loan me any more. I could afford to pay more, but they wouldn't lend it to me.
So you mentioned just briefly about this being a tech company. How have you been funded to date? And you mentioned obviously about the grant as well from HMRC. How have you been funded to date? And is there a sort of a way that you're going to be funded moving forward?
Sure. So today we've been funded by a family office, and they've been extremely supportive since the business launched in 2016. The HM Treasury grant, which I mentioned earlier, has also allowed us to kind of deliver the tech and also bring some key people into the business.
Because building tech's not cheap.
Correct.
Having done so myself, and
correct.
Adam sat the other side of the table wincing,
Correct.
It's expensive.
Correct. Yeah, and absolutely. London is a great place to build tech businesses, but what you find is actually you end up competing with the wider ecosystem.
Yep.
So, the people we might have in our business are equally likely to be someone the Amazons and the eBays may wish to kind of also hire. And so therefore you kind of need to offer something a little bit different.
Yeah.
It can be expensive. We have a nice business model in place, but typically with virtually, I would say 99% of tech businesses, the key challenge is to see through that initial period where funding requirements are at their highest, and allow you to come out the other side. Now, I will clearly be slightly biased, but we have a great business model in place, and so the family office, the HM Treasury money, and because you raised it, I'll answer the question. We're kind of going through a fundraising process at the moment. Okay. That money will allow us then to kind of not just build out and finish building out the tech, which is kind of largely there. It will allow us to bring the 2 or 3 products we are bringing into the marketplace in Q3 and Q4, allow us to bring those in, and most importantly help us sell those.
So it's not a case of building out more tech at this stage, it's a case of sort of expanding your service offerings? Yeah,
so we have the rent collection product that I mentioned. We have instant referencing, which is effectively using open banking and making the referencing process much quicker. We have a second credit reference agency to onboard, and all of this work is taking place kind of late Q3, very early Q4. So the money we've raised today and the fundraising process we're going through at the moment allows us to bring those products to market, and most importantly helps us sell those products.
Okay. So is there beyond Q4 of this year, once these products are out there, is there a sort of a further 2-5 year plan for Credit Ladder? Where do you see this business in the next 5 years?
So look, ultimately, I want to make sure every single tenant in the UK is reporting their rent, and whether that's directly through us or whether another business uses us as for example, a white label solution to deliver the offering. I don't genuinely mind. My background is about building brands, and there is a great opportunity to build a great brand here. But ultimately, if someone wants to use our specialism in this area to offer the service to their users, and under the right commercial agreements, we would absolutely happily do that, because you've got, we talked about mortgages, but you've also got people on the opposite end of the scale who would be described as having a thin credit file.
Yep.
So that typically would be someone who doesn't have a lot of credit history. And we've spoken to a number of lenders, and arguably we probably have got more information about their customers than they have themselves. So, imagine someone's got a thin file, but they are and have historically committed to paying their rent on time every single month. That person might need a small personal loan. Let's say it's £300 or £400.
So it's not just about mortgages, really.
Yeah, absolutely not. And the bank may not be able to underwrite that loan, and then that individual ends up going to a less,
recognised
credible.
Yes, credible. Thank you very much. Whereas if the bank knew they had a great track record of paying the rent on time, the underwriters could write and offer that loan. So actually, we're here for all tenants. So again, to answer your question, we want to grow the business out. There are 27 million households in the UK. About 35% of those are in rented accommodation. There's absolutely no reason why all of those people shouldn't be reporting their rent. There are people renting today, doing jobs today that historically would already be homeowners.
Yep.
So, the kind of typical view of a renter actually is, there is no typical renter anymore. No. It's a very different market to 20 years ago. Yeah. So taking it out to every single tenant, to fine tune and grow the product offerings, to tackle the UK market, and then look to see where we can take this outside of the UK are certainly our key objectives for the next 2 to 5 years.
So I sit here as a tenant, and I'm sure we've heard your agents slant on this. I can't think of any reason why, as a tenant, I wouldn't want to go through this. It's gonna help me. I mean, the long-term vision for me is to get onto the ladder and get a mortgage, and this is going to enable me to do that.
But it's the other aspect as well. I'd say people need credit for all sorts of reasons. It's the world we live in, and it's great that it's not just about mortgages. I mean, that's obviously a principle, but if it's going to help the credit history be interpreted by the lenders to enable credit to be offered, at a reasonable rate, to a wider market, then that's a good thing and a fair thing.
So let's take a slight gear change and talk about something that's topical in the property world. And I know you can't wait to get going on this, Adam. So, and why don't you tell us exactly what the tenant fee ban is before you go into your rant?
I'm not going to rant.
Tell us what it is first.
I thought we were going to talk about Brexit.
And no.
Don't start me.
So tell us what it is,
okay.
And then we'll sort of discuss the potential impacts. And
well, for years, tenants have been charged fees, and of course, when I started, we used to charge. There'd be an administration cost for a tenancy agreement and an inventory. We'd have to outsource an inventory company to come and do it. There would be a cost. And we'd split that. Most agents would do it this way. We'd split it equally between landlord and tenant with a little markup, because you've got to administer it, and that's the way the world works. But increasingly, agents took the mickey, and the costs started to go up and up and up and up. To, frankly, we heard of some agents, I won't say who would just, they all know who they are. They would charge ridiculous amounts of money to onboard a tenant into a tenancy. It's shocking. So there's no question something needed to be done. So this legislation, tenant fee ban, is effectively what it is. No fees other than the holding deposit, which is deducted from a first month's rent, and then ultimately a deposit on the property. There's only payments, the only amount of money that a tenant can be charged. So they are not allowed to be charged from the 1st of June this year. Any tenancy before that, those fees still apply, but any tenancy that commences after the 1st of June this year, no fees can be charged to a tenant.
So to be clear, all that they can charge is the deposit
and the rent.
And the rent.
Yep.
So surely, is that money going to be made up elsewhere? Is rent going to go up?
There are costs, and an inventory will still need to be done. Landlords may not want to pay that cost all entirely themselves. The argument why I think, my personal view is that to make a ban, a block across the board on all tenant fees is not a good idea, but it certainly needed looking at, and I would suggest some form of capping personally.
Okay.
But
do you think it's gone too far the other way?
Well, I do, because think about the logic of an inventory, for example. Okay, the landlord is letting the property to the tenant and stating that the property is in excellent condition, invariably better than it is.
Yep.
That's not being unfair, but generally they've got a vested interest to ensure their property is back in the same condition as they got it. Less natural fair wear and tear. And a tenant will invariably say that they hand the property back better than invariably it is. So it's a contentious issue from day one.
Yeah.
Minor, but it's a contentious issue. So the only fair way to do it is to, I view, as an agent, was to employ an independent inventory company and have the cost shared between landlord and tenant. It made it fair. Where it went wrong is agents making too much for markup.
And taking the mick.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I can understand why they brought it in. And the same thing applies with a tenancy agreement. The argument with references is slightly different. And I'm pretty certain you'll have a view on that, Sheraz. But
I've got a view on most things.
Yeah, I like the t-shirt, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Can I have one?
Depends.
So from my perspective, it needed addressing, and but at the same time, the tasks still need to be carried out. So my concern is that if landlords are having to pay for this, albeit without the markup, it's an extra cost. Either they're going to swallow it or they're going to put it on the rent.
So Sheraz, have you got a view on this?
Look, to be fair, Adam makes some very good points. So I have an example of a tenant that I know who was moving out of a property into a new property, and they were asked to pay fees of £500.
Yeah,
okay, which is insane.
Yeah.
Now the worst thing is the agent managed that property on behalf of the landlord, so it wasn't let only, they managed the property. Tenant said to me, has the agent come to you for a reference,
Yeah.
Landlord reference?
Yeah.
No, I'm not the landlord, but I was managing the property for someone. And the short answer was no.
No.
Right? So let's think about that. The agent has charged £500 to the tenant to find him a new property. The agent is managing that property for a landlord, and they didn't even do a landlord reference.
And that's exactly why it needed addressing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So look, there are costs involved in running a business for sure, and there is an extreme argument. Well, I think extreme argument you can basically take, which is, well, look, if you set up in business and you have those expenses, and you kind of need to deal with them, and I accept that.
Yeah.
However, what's happened is, I think historically over time, agents have seen tenants as cash cows, and in the increasing battle for landlords, they've cut what they're going to charge the landlord and try to take it on the other side.
No, by the way, I think that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah. And it's gone too far.
Yeah.
So should and I'm not saying all agents do this, but should an agent charge £400 or £500 for moving someone in? No, I don't think they do. Do I think it's gone to the other end and it's gone too far? Yeah, and I was surprised, I'm with Adam in that I thought there'd be like a cap, which is basically saying this is the maximum you can charge.
A cap rather than a ban.
It's a cap, so this is the most you can charge for X, Y, and Z. So let's see how it pans out. It's been going in Scotland for a little while.
And do we know what the response has been in Scotland? So agents are going to try and make the money up somewhere else. So do we know what the impact is in Scotland?
They can. I'm not sure the agent can make the money up anymore now, can they really?
I think it's going to be pretty tough, and I think a lot of the forecasts are that agents who overly relied on fees
are going to struggle.
And may well go out of business.
Yep.
And I think that'll be much clearer. Probably only by the end of this year, you'll have a much better position, because if 30, 40, 50% of your bottom line was coming from charging tenants.
You're going to struggle.
Yeah.
So with Credit Ladder, you mentioned you do a referencing service, so that's quite timely.
Yes.
Was that planned?
Everything's planned. As I say to my team, nothing
to do with the tenant family.
No. As I say to my team, nothing happens by accident. Absolutely, not in the tech world. Nothing happens by accident.
So how does that work?
So we recognise a tenant's rent payment through open banking. I've mentioned it a couple of times, but let me very quickly explain what it is. It's essentially where a tenant connects your bank account, connects their bank account to our platform, and gives us read-only access to their transactional data. It's something the UK government and the EU introduced mainly to encourage competition and ultimately to say that a person's banking data is actually theirs to use as they wish, and it's not something that is owned by the bank. So a number of businesses have popped up offering a range of different products and services off the back of open banking. So we go through the same process. The tenant will answer some questions like they would on a normal reference. We then use the bank connection to verify and validate income, for example, because we can see historical transactions. We can see that they've been paying the rent and whether that rent payment was paid on time, and then we provide that information back to the agent. It can be done pretty quickly.
What format do you get back to the agent on then? What will the agent see?
The agent will see what they see today. Typically when they do a reference is they'll get back a PDF report.
Fine.
So we'll do a.
But what the tenant spent in Sainsbury's wouldn't be.
No, absolutely not.
I think that would be a concern, probably.
No. So what we'll do is we'll run a credit check on that individual, and we'll verify income, and we'll verify historical rent payment. Whether that person has shopped in Sainsbury's, Tesco's, or Lidl is frankly none of the agent's business.
Yeah. So the agent can. Obviously, the ban coming in, the agent still needs to be finding those references and providing them. So that's a great option for them.
So, well, actually, the reality is an agent could turn around and say,
have copies of your bank statements, or
so you could go back to the old-fashioned way, which is you put the onus onto the tenant and say, look, here is all of the information you need to bring to us, okay, which is kind of how it used to get done. So you then have to start going off and probably printing off bank PDFs, statements and all that kind of stuff,
utility bill or whatever it may be.
All that. Because an agent could actually, and they have done in Scotland, they've turned around and said, look, we no longer offer this service, so you need to bring all this evidence to us, and then basically we can
onus is now
confirm
on the tenant.
We can then confirm it. So this is a very quick way of reducing administrative burden on kind of everyone, and I think the service is very good value. So including a credit check, it's £12 including VAT.
£12. Can a landlord do that?
Yes, they can.
They can do that, but
absolutely.
also an agency can say, I want you to do all my credit checks for you right now.
Correct.
And it's £12. Did you say? Sorry?
Including VAT,
Including VAT.
Yeah, £12
per reference, per individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good value.
Yeah.
Very good value. Very good value.
Yeah.
So talk us, Adam, why don't you just give us a high-level overview of sort of the ongoing relationship between Openbrix and Credit Ladder?
Sure. Well, part of our strategy is to be able to, from the agent's point of view, agents are our principal clients. They're the ones who we want to support. And just go back to the basics here. The price to as an agent to go on board to a portal varies depending on who you are.
Yep.
If you're a shareholder within one of those portals, you get it a very good deal.
Yep.
If you're not, which the majority aren't, and you're an independent agent, you get you get taken to the cleaners, quite frankly. But I'm not taking anything away from the portals. They're absolutely brilliant. They are a victim, if you like, of their own success because they work. I remember pre-portal days with just local rags, local papers, and it was that was expensive. Portals came on and really reinvented the wheel for us. So hats off. Brilliant concept. It's not a level playing field. So we want to bring in a monthly subscription fee, low cost, for an agent to for £100 a month. They can effectively put on as many or as little properties as they like.
Just not capped at per property?
No, it's not capped. A lot of portals that commence sometimes start at low cost, and it variably goes up. In fact, it does in every time. I remember when I first joined Rightmove, for example, it was very low cost, and it's not low cost anymore.
Yep.
And I think there's not an agent in the country, even the ones who are getting a slightly lower fee, won't disagree with that. It is very expensive, but a brilliant product. So the way the blockchain works is that we literally write it in stone. That price will not go up unless 51% of our community say we want you to put the prices up. It's their community.
Yep.
So how that works is so we want to bring a level playing field and transparency for the agents. But they're one half of it. The users, being the buyers and the renters, are the other. At the moment, they all go on Rightmove or Zoopla or on the market, and they'll see the selection of property in the UK. And the search methods are very clear. It's very good. And Openbrix will be adopting exactly the same service on that, except with a few added bonuses. As a user, being a tenant or a buyer, you certainly go on your property platform to find your property. Once you've found it, you're dealing with the agent. That is where your relationship with that portal stops.
Okay.
We won't be. So we recognised the importance of credit ladder. And I firmly believe, exactly as Sheraz has just said, that there's not a tenant, not a responsible tenant in the land who shouldn't be on this platform on Credit Ladder. So by finding their property through Openbrix, they will be, if they want to have the benefit of having their rent read after they've done the deal, if you like, with the property concerned, they can link through us to Credit Ladder and have their rent read in the traditional way. They'll be onboarded onto the platform, onto Credit Ladder, registered with Credit Ladder. But one of the benefits to Credit Ladder is that they can go through the open banking system, which Sheraz has just explained.
Yeah.
Or they can, as I know on the community, if you like, can read the rent directly, when it's been verified by the agent or the landlord that the rent has been paid. So it's there's a dual way that Credit Ladder can work.
So two-way partnership.
And the other thing is obviously tenants will be getting being able to join our loyalty scheme. So when they're paying their rent, not only will they get their rent history influenced, but they'll also get loyalty points which they can use for Uber, Amazon, Adidas, M&S.
And that's the joys of the blockchain.
That's the joys of the blockchain, absolutely. And that's a service that is not available in the UK on the property portal at the moment.
So, Sheraz, two-way relationship?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's important for us we're a tech business, so it's important for us to push the boundaries of not just our technology, but also tech in kind of related space, which is what the guys at Brix are doing. And I understand firsthand what Adam's talking about, having spent just under 3 years working for aforementioned property portals. They deliver a great service.
They do.
But actually things also move on.
They do move on, and we're not reinventing the wheel here, but we're making a low-profile, nice alloy one that's perhaps going to be the next. It is the next generation. We're aiming for. And
as we've already sort of touched on, the benefits are not only for the tenants but for the agents as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We want this to be again the transparency and the cost. We hope it's incentive enough for a responsible agent to come on, and the interest we've had to date is substantial. We're still building out some of the platform, but we're ahead of schedule. So we're just now beginning to generate the interest from agents and from users.
It's exciting.
It is.
So as we come towards the end, Is there anything either of you wanted to add?
Yeah, I definitely want one of those t-shirts.
What size do you need, Adam?
We can do that off there.
Let's not do
We can do that off there.
Definitely medium. So no, I'd like to see. I share what you just said about wanting to onboard. I'd like every tenant in the UK who's got to be onboarded with us to use our platform, to register with Credit Ladder. And obviously, we want the agents to understand the importance of how Credit Ladder can help their business. Having an accredited tenant is a great thing to be able to tell to your potential clients that, look, we have a vested interest. Our tenant has a vested interest to pay their rent on time. Nowhere before has an agent been able to say that about their potential tenants.
Making new waves in the PropTech world.
And we're going to definitely bribe the tenants with some loyalty points, and we've got a fantastic loyalty scheme, which is exciting actually. Well, I know what your generation's like. You always want something. Millennials. God, yeah. I don't know what we're called. What are we? Baby boomers, I think. But millennials always want something. Right.
Do you even have a name?
Over. I don't want your silly t-shirt.
Well, Sheraz, thank you ever so much for coming in.
No, my pleasure.
Great.
Thank you
very much.
me.
Very interesting.
Adam.
My pleasure.
Oh, no, it's mine.
Thank you, Elliot.
Cheers, gents.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Hi, guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you found some nuggets from the podcast that can help you in your career and business. If you want to get in touch with us, see how we're doing, how we're developing, then please visit openbrix.co.uk. That's Openbrix with an X.